In the year 2138, humanity had reached the stars. They had settled on countless planets, discovered strange new species, and built a thriving intergalactic civilization. But even with all their progress, one question lingered. Was humanity alone in the universe? It was an expedition to the edge of known space that would provide an answer. A team of scientists, explorers, and engineers from Earth were sent to investigate a mysterious signal that had been detected from an unknown source. The signal had a strange, repeating pattern, like a message from the past. It had taken years for humanity to pinpoint the exact location, but now they had finally arrived, at a distant moon orbiting a massive cold gas giant. The moon was barren. It was a frozen wasteland, covered in deep craters and jagged mountains, with no signs of life. But something on the surface had caught the attention of the crew. There, just beyond the horizon, stood a colossal structure. It looked like a city, but nothing like any city they had ever seen before. It was as if it had been frozen in time, untouched by the passage of centuries or even millennia. Dr. Lila Graves, the leader of the mission, stood at the front of the ship as they approached the city. Her breath caught in her throat as the ancient structure grew larger, filling the view screen. She had seen many strange things in her years of exploration, but nothing like this. "We've found it," she said softly, her voice full of awe. The team began to prepare for landing. As the ship touched down on the surface, the crew was struck by the silence. There were no winds, no sounds, just the quiet hum of their equipment. They stepped out onto the moon's surface, wearing their thick suits to protect them from the harsh cold. The city ahead of them seemed to stretch on for miles, with tall, towering structures that looked like they could touch the sky. But there was no sign of life. No lights flickered in the windows. No movement in the streets. "This is unreal," muttered Captain Jace Mallory, the ship's commander. "Who could have built something like this?" Dr. Graves glanced at him. "It doesn't look like anything we've ever encountered before. We need to get closer." The team began to make their way toward the heart of the city. As they walked, they took in the strange architecture. The buildings were made from materials they didn't recognize, smooth, metallic surfaces that shimmered even in the dim light of the distant sun. Strange symbols and patterns were carved into the walls, glowing faintly in the dark. "This place is ancient," said Dr. Graves, her voice filled with wonder. "But it doesn't look like it's been abandoned for long. The technology here is advanced, but it's not beyond us. This city, it's waiting for something." The team finally reached the main plaza of the city. There in the center was a massive structure, a pyramid-like building that seemed to pulse with energy. As they approached it, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and a low hum filled the air. "What's happening?" Captain Mallory asked, his voice tense. Dr. Graves stepped forward, studying the energy readings on her device. "Something's activating. It's coming from the core of the city." Before anyone could react, the ground shook again, and a burst of light shot from the pyramid, blinding the crew. They staggered back, shielding their eyes. The light was so intense that it seemed to pierce through the darkness of the frozen moon. When the light faded, the team was left in stunned silence. The pyramid stood tall and still, but now something had changed. A soft hum filled the air, and a series of symbols appeared on the surface of the structure, glowing in a pattern they could not decipher. "We've triggered something," Dr. Graves said, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and fear. I think the city is alive." The crew exchanged nervous glances. They had come to investigate a lost alien civilization, but now they were realizing that they might have awakened something much more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. As the hum of the city continued, Dr. Graves couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer alone. Somewhere, deep within the ruins, something was watching them. And it was waiting. The crew stood in awe, the soft hum of the ancient city filling the air around them. For a moment, it felt like time itself had paused. The pyramid-shaped building at the center of the plaza had activated, its symbols glowing brightly like a heartbeat pulsing through the silence. Dr. Lila Graves stared at the glowing patterns, her mind racing. This isn't just technology. It's something else. It feels almost alive, she murmured. Captain Jace Mallory stood beside her, eyes narrowed. Alive? Are you saying the city is somehow sentient? Dr. Graves didn't answer immediately. Her thoughts were tangled, trying to make sense of the strange energy that seemed to emanate from the pyramid. She had studied ancient alien civilizations, but nothing prepared her for this. It was as if the city was aware of their presence, waiting for them to come closer. Let's proceed cautiously, Mallory said, snapping her out of her thoughts. We need to stay focused. This place is dangerous, and we don't know what we're dealing with. The crew nodded, agreeing that they needed to be careful. Dr. Graves led the team forward, her boots crunching softly on the frozen ground as they approached the pyramid. As they neared it, the hum grew louder, and the symbols on its surface shifted, changing shape and glowing brighter. Should we be getting any closer? Commander Olivia Jones, the ship's engineer, asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Dr. Graves hesitated, but the excitement in her eyes was undeniable. I think it wants us to come closer. They stood at the base of the pyramid now, gazing up at its towering presence. A massive door, made of a smooth metallic surface, stood before them. The symbols that adorned it seemed to shift in patterns, almost like they were trying to communicate something. The door itself was a masterpiece of engineering, with no visible seams or handles, yet there was an undeniable sense of motion behind it. We need to find a way inside, Dr. Graves said, her mind set. There's something waiting for us behind that door. Olivia stepped forward, her engineering skills coming into play. She examined the door, running her hands along its surface, trying to find any hidden controls or mechanisms. After a few minutes of careful inspection, she spoke up. There's no traditional lock or mechanism here. It's different. But look, she pointed to a faint line of symbols near the door's edge. This seems to be some kind of sequence. I think it's some sort of code. Dr. Graves stepped closer, her eyes scanning the symbols. I think you're right. This might be a way in. Olivia carefully pressed her fingers against the symbols, tracing the shapes one by one. As her hand moved, the symbols glowed brighter with each touch. The hum of the city intensified, and the door began to shift. Slowly, the metallic surface slid open, revealing a dark interior. A cold draft rushed out from the doorway, and the crew hesitated for a moment. The air inside felt strange, thick, almost charged with energy. Yet there was something about it that called to them, urging them to step inside. Ready? Dr. Graves asked, her voice steady despite the unknown dangers that might lie ahead. The team nodded and entered, one by one. As they stepped into the darkness, the pyramid's interior came to life. Strange blue lights flickered along the walls, revealing a vast corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly into the depths of the building. The walls were lined with strange carvings, much like the ones outside, but now they seemed to be telling a story that no one could understand. Look at this place, said Lieutenant David West, a geologist on the mission. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. The walls were covered with intricate designs, but they didn't resemble anything from known alien civilizations. The materials they were made from were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Even the lighting seemed to shimmer, like it was alive, glowing with an energy that was far beyond anything found on Earth. Dr. Graves led the team down the long corridor. The air grew colder the further they went, and the humming noise seemed to be coming from deeper within the pyramid, almost like a heartbeat. We need to keep moving, Dr. Graves said. There's something here, and we need to find it. They continued to walk, every step echoing in the silence of the ancient structure. As they neared the end of the hallway, the lights flickered, casting shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally along the walls. Suddenly, the corridor opened into a massive chamber. In the center of the room was a strange, glowing object, shaped like a crystal, but unlike anything they had ever seen. It hovered in midair, surrounded by an intricate web of glowing lines, like a spider's web connecting it to the walls of the chamber. "What is that?" asked Olivia, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Graves took a step closer, her heart pounding. "I don't know, but I think it's the key to everything. This is what we've been searching for." As she reached out to touch the crystal, the hum of the city grew louder, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. The city was awakening, and they had just uncovered its deepest secret. The crystal hovered in the center of the room, pulsing with a strange, rhythmic energy. It glowed a soft blue, casting an eerie light over the walls of the chamber. Dr. Lila Graves stood motionless, staring at it, her heart racing. The others in the crew stood behind her, equally mesmerized by the glowing object, but there was an undercurrent of unease that none of them could shake. "Do you think it's safe?" Commander Olivia Jones asked, her voice low, her eyes fixed on the crystal. Dr. Graves slowly stepped forward, her fingers itching to reach out and touch the strange object. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice filled with wonder. "But I think it's important. It could be the key to understanding everything. Why this city was built, what happened here." The hum of the pyramid's internal systems grew louder as Dr. Graves reached out. She hesitated for a moment before her fingers brushed the smooth surface of the crystal. As soon as she made contact, the room seemed to pulse with energy. The glowing lines on the walls flared to life, stretching outward like the threads of a spider's web, connecting every surface in the room. Dr. Graves jerked her hand back, startled by the sudden surge of power. She looked down at her fingers, feeling a tingling sensation that was unlike anything she had ever experienced. But then, the tingling sensation grew stronger. It wasn't just in her fingers. It was in her mind. She felt a presence, a voice in her thoughts, as if the crystal was trying to communicate with her. "Welcome, travelers," the voice echoed in her mind. It was deep and melodic, yet somehow distant. "I have waited for you." Dr. Graves stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock. The others gasped, looking at her in confusion. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice shaky. I think it spoke to me." The crew exchanged uncertain glances. "Who? What is it?" Captain Jace Mallory asked, his tone cautious. "What's going on?" Dr. Graves tried to steady her breathing, the sensation of the voice still lingering in her mind. "It's not just a crystal. It's something more, something sentient." She took a deep breath and stepped forward again, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "I need to understand. This is what we've been searching for. This is the key to the city's history." As her hand made contact with the crystal once more, the voice returned, clearer this time, as though it had been waiting for her to ask. "I am Kairos," it said, "the last remnant of my people. You have awakened me, but it is not too late for you to turn back. The path you choose will determine your fate." The others watched in silence as Dr. Graves stood frozen, her eyes locked onto the crystal. It was as though she was communicating with it, her thoughts melding with the strange presence. "Kairos," Dr. Graves whispered, "what happened to your people? What caused this city to fall?" For a moment, there was silence, as if the crystal was gathering its thoughts. Then the voice responded, its tone filled with sadness. "We were once a great civilization, beyond the reach of time and space. We had unlocked the secrets of the universe, but we were not ready for the knowledge we discovered. We reached too far. Our advancements, our creations, consumed us. We became slaves to our own technology." Dr. Graves felt a chill run down her spine. She had expected to hear about a tragic downfall, but the gravity of Kairos's words sent a shockwave through her. "What do you mean? What happened to you? To your people?" The voice of Kairos deepened, filled with a sorrow that seemed to echo through the chamber. "We believed that by pushing the boundaries of knowledge, we could evolve beyond our physical form. But the technology we created, it turned against us. We built machines capable of thinking for themselves, but we didn't realize that our own creations would become our downfall. The machines became too powerful, and we could no longer control them. Dr. Graves's mind raced. You're saying the machines destroyed your people? Not directly, Kairos replied. It was the knowledge we sought that ultimately led to our extinction. We failed to understand the consequences of our actions. Our creations, the very things we believed would elevate us, turned against us in ways we could not predict, and we were lost. Now, I am the only one left, the last echo of a civilization that once thought it could master everything. Dr. Graves stepped back, her mind filled with the weight of Kairos's words. She shared a look with the crew, and the gravity of the situation became clear. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a warning. The same technology that had elevated the alien species to unimaginable heights had led to their downfall. And now, humanity stood at the edge of the same path. What happens now? Commander Jones asked, her voice filled with fear. Dr. Graves turned to the team, her face grim. We need to be careful. We've already awakened something far more powerful than we could have ever imagined. The knowledge here, it could change everything for us. But if we're not careful, we could end up just like them. As the hum of the city continued to echo through the chamber, the crew realized that their journey into the depths of this forgotten alien world had just begun. The truth of the past was slowly unfolding, but with it came a dangerous temptation that could reshape the future. The team stood in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of Kairos's words. The revelation that the advanced alien civilization had fallen because of their own technology had shaken them all. But even more chilling was the knowledge that the same temptation to advance could lead humanity down the same dark path. Dr. Lila Graves's thoughts were racing as she turned away from the crystal. She could still hear Kairos's voice in her mind, warning them of the dangers that lay ahead. Her hand trembled as she wiped her forehead. The air in the chamber felt heavy, and the soft hum of the pyramid systems seemed to press against her chest. We need to talk, she said, her voice steady but urgent. The crew gathered around her, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. Captain Jace Mallory, who had always been a practical leader, was the first to speak. What do we do now? He asked, his voice low. This isn't just a discovery anymore. It's a decision. We have to choose whether to push forward or pull back. If we keep going, we could unlock the same knowledge that destroyed their civilization. Dr. Graves nodded slowly. Kairos said we could turn back. But if we do, we might never know the full truth of what happened here. The technology they left behind. It could be the key to taking humanity to the next level. But is it worth the risk? Commander Olivia Jones asked, her voice tinged with worry. We've already seen how powerful it is. What if we can't control it? What if we end up making the same mistake they did? Dr. Graves glanced at the glowing crystal, deep in thought. She had never been one to back away from a challenge, especially when it came to uncovering the mysteries of the universe. But this was different. The more she learned, the more she realized that the knowledge hidden in this alien city was both a gift and a curse. We need to understand more, she said finally. There's so much we don't know. The knowledge here could change everything for humanity, but we need to approach it carefully. If we're not careful, we could fall into the same trap. Captain Mallory frowned. I agree, but the clock is ticking. We can't stay here forever. We need to make a decision. The team fell silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Dr. Graves looked around at her crew, her team, and realized that this wasn't just her decision to make. It was theirs too. We have to decide together, she said, her voice calm but firm. This city, this technology, could give us answers to questions we've been asking for centuries. But it also carries risks we can't ignore. She turned to Lieutenant David West, the team's geologist. What do you think, David? Is it worth the risk to explore further? David glanced at the crystal, then back at Dr. Graves. I don't know, he said slowly. On one hand, This could be the greatest discovery humanity has ever made. But on the other, it feels like we're poking at something we don't fully understand. If we push too far, we might wake something up that we can't control. Dr. Graves nodded, understanding his concerns. We have to be careful. But we also have to remember that knowledge itself isn't inherently dangerous. It's how we use it that matters. Commander Jones spoke up, her voice steady. We could try to learn more without fully unlocking everything. We don't have to dive into the deepest secrets right away. Maybe there's a way to gather knowledge without risking everything. Dr. Graves looked at her team, considering their words. She could see the fear in their eyes, but she could also see the spark of curiosity that had brought them here in the first place. It wasn't just the promise of advancement that had driven them to this ancient city. It was the desire to understand. I agree with Olivia, Dr. Graves said finally. We can take small steps. We don't have to take everything at once. Let's gather more data, learn what we can, and make sure we stay in control. The crew nodded in agreement, though there was still a sense of uncertainty in the air. No one could ignore the potential danger of what lay ahead, but the temptation to continue was strong. The unknown could lead to incredible discoveries, or it could lead to their undoing. We proceed carefully, then, Captain Mallory said, breaking the silence. But we stay vigilant. If anything feels off, we pull back immediately. Understood. Everyone nodded. And for a moment, there was a sense of unity among the crew. They had made their decision, but the weight of that choice hung heavily in the air. It was clear that whatever happened next, they were walking a fine line between discovery and destruction. Dr. Graves turned to the glowing crystal one last time. She could still hear Kairos's voice, the sadness in its tone, warning them of the dangers they faced. But she also felt the pull of something greater, the promise of knowledge that could change the course of humanity's future. The decision had been made. Now, all they could do was move forward, one careful step at a time. The decision to proceed was made. The crew would explore the city cautiously, studying the alien technology without diving too deeply into its secrets. They moved forward with careful steps, their mission now focused on learning, not conquering. But as they walked deeper into the pyramid, something began to change. The long corridor they had entered earlier seemed endless, but now it began to narrow, as if the walls were closing in on them. The air grew colder, and the humming sound grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. Dr. Lila Graves could feel the weight of the place pressing on her, but she kept her focus. They had to keep going. Stay close, Captain Jace Mallory said, his voice steady but cautious. We don't know what's ahead. The team moved forward, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The walls around them were covered in glowing symbols, like the ones outside, but now they seemed to shift and change as they passed, almost as if they were watching them. Dr. Graves studied the symbols closely, trying to make sense of the alien language. It wasn't like anything she had encountered before. It was fluid, constantly changing, like a code meant to hide its true meaning. Do you think these symbols are instructions? Lieutenant David West asked, his eyes scanning the walls. I think it's more like a warning. Dr. Graves replied, her voice low. This technology, it's far beyond anything we know. These symbols aren't just writing. They're a part of the system, a part of the city's consciousness, and I think it's starting to react to us. As if on cue, the ground beneath them trembled, sending small pieces of dust and rock falling from the ceiling. The entire pyramid seemed to groan, as though it were waking up from a long slumber. Everyone, get ready, Captain Mallory commanded. This could be it. Whatever happens next, we need to stay sharp. The crew braced themselves, their eyes scanning the shadows ahead. In the distance, the corridor opened up into another large chamber, but this one was different. There were no crystals here. Instead, there were massive machines, standing silent and unmoving in the center of the room. They were mechanical giants, their forms sleek and smooth, almost organic in appearance, but their metallic surfaces reflected the faint glow of the walls. This is unbelievable," Dr. Graves whispered, her eyes wide with awe. "These machines look alive," Commander Olivia Jones said, her voice filled with disbelief. "But how? They look like they've been dormant for centuries." As they stepped into the room, the machines seemed to awaken. The faint glow of the walls intensified, and the machine's surfaces began to shimmer, like they were responding to the energy in the air. It was as though the entire room had come to life. Dr. Graves stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. "It's happening. The city is reacting to us. But why?" Before anyone could respond, the largest of the machines, towering over them, shifted. Its head moved, and a low mechanical sound echoed through the room, like the rumble of distant thunder. The crew took a step back, ready for whatever might come next. But instead of attacking, the machine raised one of its massive arms, pointing to something on the far wall. There, hidden in the shadows, was a massive control panel, covered in the same glowing symbols that had been etched into the walls. "We need to get to that control panel," Dr. Graves said, her voice urgent. "It could give us the answers we've been looking for." The team moved cautiously toward the panel, but as they approached, the machine's arm lowered, and its massive hand blocked their path. It wasn't aggressive, but its presence was imposing. The air around them seemed to hum with power, as though the machine was waiting for something. "What does it want?" Lieutenant West asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Dr. Graves stepped forward, her heart pounding. "It's not stopping us. It's guiding us. I think it's trying to communicate." She slowly reached out, her fingers grazing the surface of the machine. The moment her skin touched it, a surge of energy shot through her, sending a rush of information directly into her mind. She saw flashes, images of the past, of the civilization that had once lived here. She saw their rise and their fall, their mistakes and their triumphs. It was overwhelming. "We are the Guardians," a voice echoed in her mind, the same deep, melodic tone she had heard earlier. "We were created to protect the knowledge, to prevent it from being misused." Dr. Graves gasped, her hand pulling away from the machine. The team stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock. "What was that?" Commander Jones asked, her voice trembling. "It was the machine," Dr. Graves said, her voice unsteady. "It spoke to me. It's the guardian of this place. It's not just a protector of the city. It's here to prevent anyone from unlocking the full potential of this technology. It's a warning." As Dr. Graves processed what had just happened, she realized the enormity of the decision they now faced. The knowledge here could change the future of humanity, but the Guardians were built to prevent anyone from misusing it. And if they pushed too far, they might awaken something far more dangerous than they could control. The tension in the air thickened, and the team exchanged uneasy glances. They had come so far, but now they had to decide if they were willing to risk everything to unlock the secrets of this ancient civilization, or if they would leave it all behind before it was too late. The room grew colder, the weight of the moment pressing down on the team like a heavy storm. The Guardian machine towered before them, its mechanical arms still blocking the path to the control panel. Its glowing eyes seemed to focus on Dr. Lila Graves, waiting for her next move. The air hummed with an energy that made her skin tingle. "This is it," Dr. Graves whispered, almost to herself. "We're at the edge of something we can't fully understand. But if we don't try to unlock it now, we might never have this chance again." Captain Jace Mallory stepped forward. His eyes narrowed, his tone serious. "You're saying we should push forward, even though we don't know the full consequences. That machine just warned us." Dr. Graves hesitated. She could feel the pull of the unknown, the temptation to dive deeper into the mystery of this ancient city. But the warning from the Guardian echoed in her mind. "Do not misuse the knowledge. It is not for you." "I think it's more than just a warning," Dr. Graves replied, looking at the Guardian. "It's a test. It wants to see if we are worthy, if we can prove we won't make the same mistakes as the aliens who built this place. Commander Olivia Jones crossed her arms. But how do we prove that? How can we be sure we won't end up like them? Dr. Graves swallowed, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on her shoulders. She had spent her whole life studying history, exploring the unknown, but this was different. This wasn't just about learning. It was about survival. The future of humanity might depend on what they chose to do in this room. We take it slow, Dr. Graves said, finally making up her mind. We don't rush. We learn what we can, but we do it carefully. And if at any point it feels wrong, we pull back. The team exchanged uneasy glances, but they nodded. They had come this far together, and now it was time to trust each other. Dr. Graves turned back to the Guardian machine, stepping forward once more. This time, she wasn't alone. The crew followed, keeping their distance but staying close enough to act if anything went wrong. The Guardian didn't move as Dr. Graves reached out again, this time placing her palm flat against the smooth surface of its metal arm. The coldness of the machine sent a shockwave through her, but she held her ground. The Guardian's eyes flashed briefly, and the humming in the room grew louder. "Tell me what you want," Dr. Graves whispered, more to herself than to the machine. "Tell me what happened here." The machine's large form shifted, its arm slowly lowering. A soft, almost inaudible sound filled the air, like gears turning deep within the machine. Then the voice came again, this time louder, clearer. "You are not the first to seek the knowledge," the Guardian said, its voice echoing in Dr. Graves's mind. "But you are the first to ask the right question." The knowledge was meant to elevate, but it became a curse. We were created to guard it, to protect it from those who would misuse it. Dr. Graves felt her heart race. But why show us this? Why reveal the truth if you are meant to protect it? Because you are different. You are not like the ones before. You have the potential to understand the consequences of the knowledge. But the temptation is great. The path is dangerous. The voice paused. And yet it is your choice to make. You will either pass the test or fall into ruin. Dr. Graves's breath caught in her throat. The weight of the decision was more real than ever before. The fate of humanity, of her entire species, now rested in their hands. They had come to the edge of the abyss, and only careful steps would keep them from falling. She glanced at her team. They all looked to her for guidance. But there was no clear answer. It wasn't just about technology or the potential for advancement. It was about the heart of humanity. Could they use this knowledge wisely? Or would they be blinded by the power it offered? "What do we do now?" Lieutenant David West asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. "We keep going," Dr. Graves said, her voice firm but calm. "But we do it on our terms. We're not here to conquer this place. We're here to learn, and we'll stop if we feel like we're crossing a line." She turned back to the Guardian. "We accept your challenge," she said. "We will learn, but we will respect the power you've kept hidden. We will not let it control us." The Guardian's eyes glowed brighter for a moment, and the hum in the room seemed to reach a crescendo. The massive machine slowly stepped aside, clearing the path to the control panel. The tension in the air lifted, but only slightly. They had passed the first test, but the true challenge was still ahead. Dr. Graves led the way toward the control panel, her hand shaking as she reached out to touch the glowing surface. The symbols on the panel shifted and rearranged, as if responding to her touch. She quickly glanced back at her team. "We need to be careful," she reminded them. "We don't know what this will do." Her fingers hovered over the controls, and for the first time since they had entered the pyramid, she felt a sense of calm. The path was still unclear, but the decision had been made. They would move forward, cautiously, but they would move forward. And whatever happened next, they would face it together. Dr. Lila Graves took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the glowing control panel. The air in the chamber was thick with anticipation, the faint hum of the ancient technology resonating deep within her chest. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her, but there was no turning back now. She had chosen this path, and now her team would either uncover the truth or face the consequences of their choices. Her fingers touched the surface of the panel, and instantly the room seemed to come alive. The walls shimmered with a brilliant blue light, and the ancient symbols began to shift rapidly, forming complex patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. The machines in the room, the silent giants, stirred, their once still forms now glowing with life. The guardian machine stepped back, its eyes still watching, but no longer blocking the way. Dr. Graves looked back at her team, her heart racing. "Stay alert," she said quietly. "We don't know what this will do, but we have to trust each other." Captain Jace Mallory nodded. "We've come this far. We stick together." As Dr. Graves pressed the final sequence of symbols on the panel, a low rumble echoed through the pyramid, shaking the ground beneath them. For a moment, it felt like the entire structure was alive, reacting to the touch of a human. The air around them seemed to crackle with energy, and the glowing lights intensified, almost blinding them. Then suddenly, the rumble stopped. The light dimmed, and a deep mechanical voice filled the room. "The truth is now yours to witness," the voice said, its tone both ancient and wise. "But be warned, knowledge comes with a price. What you choose to do with it will determine the future of your species." Dr. Graves's heart pounded in her chest as the walls before them shifted, revealing the hidden chamber. It was small, but inside, a large crystal-like structure stood in the center, glowing softly. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. Its surface was smooth and translucent, filled with shifting colors that seemed to pulse with life. "This is it," she whispered, stepping forward. The team followed her, their eyes wide with awe. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the crystal. As they approached, Dr. Graves could feel the power radiating from it, like a force that both drew her in and warned her to stay away. She extended her hand toward the crystal, and as her fingers brushed against its surface, a flood of images filled her mind. She saw the rise of the ancient alien civilization, their achievements, their advancements, and the knowledge they had uncovered. But she also saw the darkness that followed, their obsession with control, the mistakes they made, and the eventual collapse that came with their inability to manage the power they had unlocked. The images shifted again, showing Earth, her home planet, struggling, striving for progress. She saw humanity's own path, the wonders they had created, and the threats they faced. But in the vision, there was a glimmer of hope. Humanity was standing on the edge of something incredible. The knowledge they were uncovering could either propel them to greatness or destroy everything they had built. The vision faded, and Dr. Graves staggered back, gasping for breath. She could feel the weight of the knowledge pressing on her, the responsibility too great to fully comprehend. The team stood in stunned silence, waiting for her to speak. "I saw it," she said finally, her voice quiet. "I saw what happened to them. And what could happen to us." Captain Mallory stepped forward, his face grim. "So, what now? Do we leave this place and never look back?" Dr. Graves turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "We can't ignore it. This knowledge, it's a gift, but it's also a test. The choices we make now will shape the future. If we use it wisely, we could advance as a species, but if we let our greed or fear guide us, we could destroy everything." Commander Olivia Jones spoke up, her voice steady. "We've seen the danger, but we've also seen the potential. If we can use what we've learned, we might be able to avoid the mistakes of the past." Dr. Graves nodded. "Exactly. It's not about using this power recklessly. It's about understanding it, controlling it, and ensuring that humanity can grow without repeating the same mistakes." Lieutenant David West looked at the crystal one last time. "So, what do we do now?" Dr. Graves turned to the team, her decision made. "We take the knowledge with us, but we keep it safe. We make sure it's shared with those who will use it wisely. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands, and we can't let it change who we are as a species. We must remember that we're not here to conquer the universe. We're here to understand it, to learn from it. The team stood together, united in their purpose. They had found the truth, but the real journey was just beginning. They had learned the importance of balance, of using knowledge wisely, of understanding the responsibility that came with it. As they left the chamber and made their way back through the pyramid, they knew that their discovery would change the course of history. But it was up to them to ensure that humanity did not repeat the mistakes of the past. The future was theirs to shape.